had an experience with credit card fraud that caused so much unnecessary stress and anxiety. I spent hours on the phone and in chats with my credit card company. I had to get 2 different cards before the fraud stopped, and I was so worried about what was going to happen to my money in my bank account. And I sometimes have the fear that it's going to happen again, right? And that's why I'm so excited to introduce You Are the Healer's newest sponsor, Aura, an app for protecting online data and personal information. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access things like my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Protecting yourself and your personal information is a form of self-care, I swear. Go to my sponsor, aura.com/healer to get a 14-day free trial and have peace of mind knowing your information is safe. Again, that's Aura, AURA.com/healer for your 2-week free trial. You Are the Healer is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy is mandatory because there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking help. I think every person who walks this earth needs therapy, honestly. I'm stoked to be connected with BetterHelp to offer affordable and accessible therapy resources. The link is in my show notes, and you can also go to betterhelp.com/healer. That's better, HELP.com/healer. Now let's get into this episode. Hello, and welcome back to You Are the Healer. I'm so happy you're here to hear this healing message. My name is Rinderknecht, and I am your host. If you're new here, hi. You Are the Healer is the podcast where I use my experience as a psychiatric nurse and my own experiences in my journey as a human with my own mental health, where I teach you guys how to heal yourselves and remind you that you have everything needed to be your own healer. So this is the first episode of the season of Spice. So in the season of Spice, I'm essentially using a big analogy for your mental health, which is spice adds flavor, and spice sometimes can cause a little too much heat and can burn, and spice can also make it delicious and yummy and enjoyable and really add some variety and some seasoning into your life. And so we're talking about neurodivergence today. And so in this episode, I'm going to be defining what neurodivergence is. I'm going to be talking about why is it relevant for you to learn about neurodivergence, even if you're someone who is neurotypical. We're going to get into common diagnoses and how labeling can sometimes be hard. We're going to talk about masking, and we're going to talk about, when the heat is a little too intense sometimes. We're going to be talking about when the spice really adds flavor and nutrients and it just is so delicious. And then we're going to be talking about how to build a life that honors your spice and end with some affirmations. And so let's get into it. So what is neurodiversity? Neurodivergence refers to natural variations in how our brains process, feel, and experience the world. And neurodivergence isn't wrong or broken, it's just different. So we live in a neurotypical society. So that is basically built around people who think, feel, experience very similarly. And neurodivergence is really any variation away from that norm. And I'm saying these things in quotes because, what is normal? Everybody's different. Everybody processes things in their own unique way. And so we're going to be talking about neurodivergence today, which more specifically, I want to be talking about autism, ADHD, dyslexia, OCD, things like that, sensory processing disorders. And I'm talking about this today because whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, this episode is for you. You will get some benefits out of listening today because understanding neurodivergence helps us build compassion for other people and their experiences. It also allows us to reduce stigma. And so the more that we talk and represent people's experiences, the more normalized it is, the less taboo and ostracized people are from society, and the more that we can really connect and thrive together. So this episode is for everybody because we are all existing on planet Earth at the same time right now. And so understanding neurodiversity and celebrating it can help us create a world where we all thrive. We're not just surviving, we're not just getting by, we're not just fitting in, but celebrating and honoring neurodiversity and how our brains can work differently. It can be a beautiful thing, and it can be a celebration, and it can really highlight people's strengths and just celebrate how we can be different, which is really a beautiful thing. I truly believe that we're all created with our unique little spices, if you will. And while sometimes it might feel like, oh my gosh, this world is not built for me, I, it might feel like, why was I made this way? I really feel like all of our characteristics were perfectly created on purpose to serve for some reason on this earth. And I'm talking about neurodiversity today because mental health is not a one size fits all category. It's not like one set of tools is going to work for everybody. Okay. Everybody's different. And learning about neurodiversity is a way that we can honor different brains. And it's really a collective healing practice. So whether you're neurodivergent or not, if we can build compassion and support and learn how to truly be there for people whose brains work differently than us, we are in a collective healing experience. And so whether that's creating a safe space for someone when they're really emotionally dysregulated, or that's you feeling comfortable enough to unmask and be your true authentic self, your neurodivergent self, either way, we are collectively healing and we're creating a safe space for us to be our true and most authentic selves, which I find very, very important. With neurodivergent people, a lot of times they're misunderstood, they're misdiagnosed, they're left out. There's a huge lack of representation, especially in people of color, queer people, and women. And so I really want to talk about it today to decrease that stigma, to hopefully have you take away something valuable from this episode and learn, if not how to be there for yourself when you're struggling with something, then learning how to be there and support other people when they're struggling. And again, I want to reiterate that you do not need to be neurodivergent to benefit from this episode. You simply just have to be a human who wants to make this world a safer, more beautiful, colorful, diverse place. So we're going to get into some definitions. So with neurodiversity, I want to talk about like some main diagnoses that fit into neurodivergency. So the first thing I want to talk about is autism. And so autism impacts our communication, sensory processing, routine, and social interaction. And I'm talking about it because people with autism sometimes have a hard time communicating in a neurotypical world. So things like eye contact might be difficult, small talk, tone matching. Sometimes when you have autism, you might have like tics and things like that, which aren't typically welcomed and embraced in society. A lot of times people with autism end up getting bullied or have a really hard time making friends. With autism too, you also have sensory overload. So things like bright lights, loud noises, textures of fabrics, crowds can kind of send you into a lot of overwhelm. And sometimes with autism, people assume that people who have autism lack empathy or emotion because of the way that they're expressing themselves in their facial expressions and in their tone, but that's oftentimes not true. So a lot of times people who have autism are really misunderstood. And again, that social isolation is a really big piece of this. And a big part of autism too is masking, which I'm going to get into a little bit later. But oftentimes people who have autism are expected to mask in order to fit in order to kind of get by and survive in society. And these things can be really difficult and really harmful. And so I'm going to move on to ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And ADHD, sometimes people think of it as like ADD and ADHD. One is inattentive, that's the ADD, and one is hyperactive, that's the ADHD. But now actually in the DSM, it's all just called ADHD. So, and ADHD affects our attention regulation, impulsivity, time management, and executive functioning. Now, a big reason why I wanted to talk about neurodiversity is because in this last year, I was actually diagnosed with ADHD, which I thought was kind of hilarious because as a psych nurse, I like had no idea that I had this until a couple people pointed it out to me. And I'm like, no way, like, no way I have it. Like, no, I just am really bad at time management. And I just like, my train of thought sometimes completely disappears and sometimes it never comes back. That's normal, right? So I really want to talk about neurodiversity because it's something that I've really been learning a lot about in the last year. And so with my ADHD, I am inattentive. And so I experience a lot of things like forgetfulness, time blindness. Sometimes it's really hard for me to get the ball rolling on things that I have to do, like getting out of bed or going to the gym. And that like decision making can be really difficult. And ADHD can be hard because a lot of times people label people who have ADHD as like lazy or inconsistent or distracted, which honestly, sometimes those things are true, but they're harmful labels. Okay. And so I want to talk about it because I want to decrease the stigma and hopefully help us change our language about some of these things. Another thing with ADHD is emotional dysregulation. So being really sensitive and having quick shifts in your emotions. That's a big part of it, and it's often misunderstood as well. There's a lot of shame that comes with ADHD. So shame from not meeting deadlines, forgetting things, burning out because you're putting in extra effort than most people are. You can have task paralysis. So that's feeling like you have all of these things to do and like, oh my gosh, I like can't do any of them. I had an experience like this last week where, I mean, I do a lot. Okay, I'm working full time as a nurse. I'm producing, editing, hosting an entire podcast. I'm starting a coaching business, and I have a social life. I go to like 2 concerts a week on average. And so I have a lot of responsibilities I have to do. And there's things like laundry and dishes and cleaning and just like staying on top of adulting tasks is so deeply, deeply overwhelming to me that sometimes I feel like I can't rest at all because I have so many things that I could be doing at once. And that task paralysis is so real. So I'm talking about all these struggles with neurodiversity, and I'm going to get into ways that we can learn how to help ourselves and tools that I've experienced and things I've learned are helpful for other people. But I do really want to talk about like sometimes these things are really hard. And that's why we're talking about it. So hopefully you can learn things and move on and do better and learn how to navigate some of these things because I very much am figuring it out right there with you guys. A big thing that with ADHD, something that I experience a lot that I didn't even really know was an ADHD thing, is overwhelm. Um, Overwhelm is basically when you have so much input happening that like you basically shut down. And so I experience overwhelm honestly kind of a lot. So I'm someone that like I'm very aware of all of the textures on my body at all times. Like now, the clothes that I wear have to be a certain texture because it will drive me. And it's all I can think about if I can like feel my tag in the back of my shirt. And I also want to say with things like this, like everyone has sensory needs. And I'll talk about labeling and like how that can be helpful and harmful. I'm going to put a pin in that and I'm going to keep going with this. But I experience overwhelm a lot because I'm very aware of everything that's happening around me. I'm a very highly sensitive person. And so I'm aware of all of the sounds that are happening at the same time, how my clothes feel on my body, what's happening around me, who am I talking to? Like sometimes there's just so much sensory input that it's like, I like freak out. I'm like, I can't, nothing's being inputted. And honestly, something that I've really noticed is like sounds. So I'm having a conversation with someone and I hear like any other sound, attention span completely gone. And this happens especially if multiple people are talking at the same time. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, please stop, because it is so overwhelming to me. And it's literally just like two sounds happening at the same time. And it's just interesting because I'm not someone that ever really like identified as having ADHD, especially because I discovered it. I was 24, 25 when I discovered I had it. I'm still like coming to terms with the fact that this is something that this is how my brain works, allegedly. I'm not entirely convinced that I have it, to be honest. But it's just interesting learning all of these things about you. And there can be a lot of shame that comes from it, feeling like, why am I different? Why am I othered? And the next diagnosis I want to talk about is dyslexia. So dyslexia is a disorder that affects your reading, spelling, and language processing. And I want to be clear that dyslexia has nothing to do with your intelligence. And so something that can be hard about dyslexia is oftentimes people mistake those who have dyslexia with having a low IQ or a low ability to learn, which is so not true. They just have a different learning style. And dyslexia can be really hard because traditional school systems are very like neurotypical focused. So they're text heavy, they're pace driven, they're not inclusive. And so a lot of times what happens with people who have dyslexia is they fall behind in the school system because they are unable to keep up because their brain is usually with dyslexia, you'll see it's mixing up words when you read or numbers or things like that. And so it's hard to keep up because your brain is working differently than other people's. And so if you fall behind in school and things like that, your self-esteem can tank at a pretty early age because you're noticing that you're learning differently than other people, and you might like feel slower because you need more time to read and things like that. And so your self-esteem can really tank at a young age with dyslexia, which can be really difficult. And so with all of these diagnoses, and yes, there are more, I'm not going to go into like the nitty-gritty of every diagnosis, but the challenge isn't having a neurodivergent brain. Okay. The challenge is living in a society that is not built for neurodiversity. The challenge is living in a society that is neurotypical and that essentially punishes you for thinking differently than other people. So now I want to talk about masking. And so you've heard me talk about it a little bit. So masking is when you suppress your natural neurodivergent traits in order to appear neurotypical. So for example, this is things like forcing eye contact when it's not something that you're necessarily comfortable with. This could be hiding stimming. So stimming is common typically in people who have autism, and that could look like rocking back and forth. That could look like flapping your arms or blinking or twitching. That is stimming. And so masking could be, hiding those things. And stimming is something that for people can be very soothing and therapeutic and regulating for them. And when people mask and they hide those self-soothing methods, that can be pretty harmful. So why is masking harmful? Well, masking can lead to burnout, anxiety, depression, identity confusion, because it really disconnects you from your authentic self. You're putting on this front. It's almost like thinking of like you're putting on like a disguise in order to survive in society. And so that can just be really distressing. And I'm sure for people that don't mask in this way, there's other ways in which they mask. So maybe it's like when you're at work, you put on your professional persona and you don't let your true personality shine through. So think about situations like that. You're not being your authentic self, which can be really taxing on you. It requires a lot more effort to keep up with. And then also when you're putting on a persona of someone who is not the real you, people might like you for this masked version of you. So you might not feel that genuine connection and love because you are presenting someone who is not you to the real world. While masking is a form of survival and it feels safe in the short term, the long term it can really cost you your joy, your energy, and your sense of self. In continuing the theme of spice, what I've been talking about is really like when spice burns, when it feels like too much, it's really, really, really spicy. You need a glass of milk after. So let's keep talking about how neurodivergence can be really spicy sometimes. So a big part of neurodivergence is sensory overload. And so those are things that I was kind of talking about earlier, when your brain and body are overwhelmed by too much input. And so that can feel different for everybody. That could feel like brain fog, like autopilot, going into panic, maybe even having a panic attack. That can be like shutting down, completely withdrawing and isolating. It can feel like your skin's crawling. It can feel nauseating. And so, like I said, it can be different for every person. And there's different triggers for everybody. So things like really bright lights, really loud environments. Like I said earlier, two people talking at the same time, that's a huge trigger for me. The texture of your clothing, really strong smells. And so these certain triggers, which are sometimes unavoidable, especially in a neurotypical environment, can really send us into overwhelm. And I want to touch a little bit on some data points of people who are neurodivergent have higher rates of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and suicidal ideation. People with autism are 9 times more likely to attempt suicide. 80% of neurodivergent individuals report significant mental health challenges. And schools, jobs, and systems demand conformity, not creativity. So a lot of times the spaces that we are in, they're not set up to celebrate neurodiversity. They're not set up to have everybody thrive. And that can be really, really challenging to navigate a system, a society, a world that isn't structured for how your brain works. And misdiagnoses are really common, especially for people of color, women, and queer folk. Sometimes they present a little bit differently, and so they're misdiagnosed. Like I said, I did not get diagnosed with ADHD until I was in my mid-20s. Like that's actually, as a psych nurse, like that's actually kind of crazy. And being misunderstood often leads to isolation, chronic stress, and trauma. And so I hope you guys can understand now why we need to learn about neurodiversity and to celebrate it, because there is a lot of harm done when we do not create spaces to support all types of people and to support all types of brains. Not everyone's brain works in the salt and pepper way, okay? Some of our brains have curry powder, some of our brains have sriracha up in there, okay? It's not the spice that's dangerous, it's being forced to pretend that you're flavorless. That is the danger. And that is why we need to work towards creating a world that is supportive and inclusive of all folks, of all kinds, not just neurodiversity, but every type of diversity. Now I want to talk about the yummy, delicious flavors of neurodiversity. Why is neurodiversity something that should be celebrated? So I asked my Instagram, I asked people to explain why they like their neurodiversity. What does their neurodiversity add to their life? And let me pull it up. And I really liked all these responses. Let me find it. So when I asked people what they like about their neurospicy brains, this is what some people said. My brain helps me with empathy and understanding others. I am relentlessly authentic, LOL. I always pursue my passions and I use my hyper focus for good. Neurodiversity has allowed me to be such a creative being. It's my superpower, and I have so many thoughts and ideas. I can conjure up wacky and effective solutions to an issue because nobody else can see it. So thank you guys for submitting those responses to that question. I loved hearing about how your neurodivergence really adds to your life. And in a more general sense, neurodiversity really allows for deep empathy, loyalty, and justice-driven thinking. Neurodiversity also can have pattern recognition, big picture visions, and nonlinear problem solving. So think about like all of the problems that we have in our world. If everybody thought the same, there would be way less solutions to the problems we have. We need neurodiversity because we need people who think differently than us. We need people who think outside of the box and can come up with a solution that no one's ever thought of before. And if you're neurotypical, you're thinking a little bit more closely to how everybody else is thinking. So you might not come up with that really creative solution. But neurodiversity, especially if it's something that we celebrate and we really build up and support and encourage people to be their true selves, think about all of the change that could be made from all of these different ways of thinking. Like we can really tap into so much more potential for the betterment of the world if we celebrate neurodiversity. Okay. Neurodiversity also is a thing. Hyper focus is a really big thing for it. I know that I have it with my ADHD. That's what I think that's actually how I've been able to do all of the You Are the Healer stuff, is because I am deeply passionate about this type of work. And hyper focus is when you just absolutely lock into something, when like time flies by and you're in that like creative flow state. With my ADHD, I am so much more able to like focus on something like this, which is interesting because I'm pretty inattentive when it comes to other things. But hyper focus is a big part of neurodiversity, and that can really lead to deep, immersive work in areas that usually you're pretty passionate about. Usually you're very interested in learning about them. And so when we really embrace neurodiversity, we can celebrate these things, and we can like hack our brains the way that they already work for good and to help ourselves out. Neurodivergence is also very creative and intuitive and innovative. It's building things that didn't exist before because no one's thought of them the way that you're thinking of them. Neurodivergence is refreshing. It's a different perspective. It enhances everybody's lives. And so it's something that I think the system wasn't built to celebrate, because that's usually how systems are, very, you fit in a box and this is how it works. But we need to celebrate neurodivergence because neurodivergence is the spice of life. It's bold, it's dynamic, it's different, it's unique, it's unforgettable. And the world is better when we make room and celebrate people for their differences. I want to take a second and talk about labels and diagnoses, because I feel like a little bit conflicted. I feel like they could be helpful and harmful at the same time, and especially with neurodiversity. I just think it's important to touch on this in this episode. So having a label or a diagnosis can be helpful because it gives you language to your experience. It helps you identify what's going on, and it opens access to accommodations and support. If you're not able to name your experience or know what's going on, then you're closed off to a lot of things. I feel like my world really opened up when I was diagnosed with ADHD, because I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not crazy, and there's just different needs that I have for my brain. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And so I had a pretty conflicting experience when it came to my ADHD, because at first I was like, no, I don't have that. Like I'm just like a little inattentive at times. Like I was very much in denial when I first got diagnosed. And I was also like kind of self-diagnosing myself at the same time too. So it was just a pretty complicated experience. But having a diagnosis or a label can be helpful also because it can help you create community and really validate your experience. I find that I really gravitate towards people who also have ADHD, especially when me and all of my friends who have ADHD are hanging out. I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're all talking during the movie and like fidgeting and all this stuff. I'm like, oh, it just feels so good to like have a space where I can really be myself. And if I didn't know that I had ADHD, then I wouldn't have really created this community for myself because I didn't even know I was part of it. But labels and diagnoses can be harmful when you are over identifying with this label or with this diagnosis. I'll try not to get on my soapbox about this too much, but I have a lot of qualms with the entire field of psychiatry and diagnosing, because psychiatry just looks at the symptoms you're experiencing and then it's like, do you have this, yes or no? There's not formal, I mean, there's testing, but it's all like you're filling out quizzes and stuff like that. There's no blood test that innately proves, oh, you have ADHD. There's no DNA testing that's like, yeah, you're autistic. It's very subjective, and it's like, do you have these things? Okay, then you have this diagnosis. But with a lot of mental health stuff, you could be having a number of symptoms for a whole number of reasons. So like a big reason why I'm kind of a little bit in denial about my ADHD is I didn't have these symptoms growing up. I was very able to focus during school. I didn't feel restless. I did very, very well growing up in school. I had great grades. And so part of me thinks, do I even have ADHD because somehow in my older adult life, I became attentive? That could be from a number of things. That could be from social media use. That could be from the number of concussions that I've gotten in snowboarding accidents. Like my problem with labels and diagnoses is it's not really the full picture. And yes, it can be helpful to have that title, to have that community, to have that validation of your experience. I completely agree that that is helpful. It's been helpful for me. And at the same time, it's almost like, oh, now you have this thing, it's yours forever. And it's like, I don't know, I'm actively trying to find ways to manage my ADHD besides prescription medication. And I think that medication is something that is very personal for everybody. I personally don't like taking meds. I don't like being on them. I don't even like giving them to people at my job because I'm like, what's really going on here? Like, let's get into it, you know? I forget why I even started this entire tangent. LOL. But one of my qualms with labeling and diagnosing is it's almost like, okay, now I have this thing. There's a lack of doing anything about it because now you have a label. It's like, oh, I just have ADHD. I'm just this way. When it's like, well, there's tools and things that we could do to manage it and to help it. And maybe these symptoms that you're having are actually from something else. But now that you have this label, it's like we're not even going to get to the root of what's happening here. So that's my issues with labeling. I think labeling and diagnosing and identifying with your diagnosis can also be challenging because there's a lot of stigma going on in general with mental health, especially with neurodiversity. And with that stigma, it can typically limit people's potential. They'll say, oh, well, you have autism, so you're never going to be able to graduate college, or you're not autistic enough. And it's like, or you're high functioning, or you're mildly, and it's just like all of these labels can actually innately cause a lot of harm because it's used to pathologize people or to shame them or to put them in a box, and then we perceive them a certain way. And so my last statement on labels and diagnoses is the label should be a lens, not a prison, not a box, not something that you have to conform to. It should just be a lens in which you see the world. It doesn't have to be your entire identity. It doesn't have to be a limitation, and it doesn't have to be this negative experience. This label, this diagnosis is just your lens of how you see the world, and it can give you clarity, it can give you understanding, it can give you some community, and that's that. It doesn't have to be your entire world. Now we're going to get into building a life that honors your spice. We're going to be building a self-care menu, a toolkit that you can use to help yourself if you are feeling dysregulated and overwhelmed. And you can also use these tools and strategies to help a loved one or someone that you know that struggles with their neurodiversity. So a big thing that has helped me, it's actually called the Pomodoro technique, which is such a fancy term because it's literally just setting a timer. So timers have been very, very helpful for me to start doing a task. So sometimes I can get really overwhelmed thinking, oh my gosh, I have to record a podcast episode. Oh my gosh, I have to do my taxes. Oh my gosh. And the tasks can feel really big and overwhelming. So something my therapist has taught me to do is set a timer for 20 minutes or whatever time feels right for you. And just do that thing for 20 minutes. And when the timer goes off, you can stop, you can do whatever you want, you can get back into bed, or you can keep going. And what I found with timers and alarms and things like that is once I've started the activity, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing it. Like I'm locked in now. And it really helps break up the task into steps that feel a lot more manageable and can really reduce that overwhelm. So first tool in your toolkit, setting timers, setting alarms, that can be a huge, huge benefit with any type of overwhelm. And also you can set alarms for like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit overstimulated. I'm just going to take a 2-minute break and I'm just going to go pace in the other room or something like that. Or I'm just going to set a 10-minute timer. I'm just going to lay down in a dark room and just really like hard reset. That's something that's been really helpful for me, especially working as a nurse and working really long shifts. The next item in our self-care menu or our toolkit is sensory related. So any sensory thing that is helpful for you. This can look like noise canceling headphones. This can look like little fidget toys, maybe sunglasses if the bright lights are really bothering you. Textures that you enjoy. So there's these really nice like sticker things that we hand out at the hospital that are just like this. I don't even know how to explain the texture, but it's like gritty kind of, and you just rub it between your fingers and oh my God, that calms me down so fast. It's ridiculous. Also, I've gotten really into fidget toys lately just because it helps my brain focus if like my hands are doing something. Sometimes if I'm like sitting down in like a lecture or a place where I have to be like presentable and professional, I'm like, oh my God, I want to leave so bad. Oh my gosh, I hate this. Like I'm trying so hard to sit still. My brain is thinking. Something with my ADHD is my brain has like 8 lanes of thought all at once. I usually have at least 2 to 3 songs stuck in my head at all times. Like it's chaos up there, okay? And so having something to fidget with and like ground myself with has been really, really enjoyable. And it's honestly hilarious because I'm a grown ass adult and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm talking with the kids at work and I'm like, I love that slime. Like that texture is really doing it for me, you know? But that just goes to show that like healing happens when it's meant to happen. There's no timeline for you. There's no feeling like you're behind or ahead. Like you are learning about you at exactly the right pace that you need to learn about you. And so sensory kits, little things that you can have to reduce your overwhelm and to ground yourself can be really, really helpful. And something that I've noticed a lot more of in like the mainstream spaces is sensory bags. And so the first time I saw something like this was at Bonnaroo. And Bonnaroo had this entire trailer for basically if you're overwhelmed or you're overstimulated. And it was like a dark air conditioned trailer with like lava lamps and soft carpet and headphones. And it was so nice. And I remember walking in and being like, thank God there's a space for people when they need it. Like it was such a safe space and environment. And sometimes you only need like 10, 15 minutes and then you're fine. But when you're really in the thick of overwhelm and emotional dysregulation, not having a space like that, oh, it's terrifying. And so I was really, really happy to see, this was 2 years ago now, that a music festival had a space like this. I was so excited about it. And I remember gabbing with the person at the festival. I was like, you have no idea how important it is that we are honoring neurodivergent people. And it was funny because I wasn't even like identifying as neurodivergent at the time, but there's probably a reason why I was so fucking excited about it now that I think about it. Oh my gosh. And they were also handing out bags at the festival. So this is like anyone who like has, sensory needs. And so some people, stuff like this doesn't bother them, but other people like can get really overstimmy very quickly. And so I remember they handed out these sensory bags and I went with multiple of my friends to this music festival, and at different times on different days, every single person used something in this bag. And I just think that really goes to show that like the more that we like embrace and support neurodiversity, the more it just helps everybody, because not everybody in my group was neurodivergent. Actually, now that I think about it, I think almost all of them are. Anyways, but At one point my friend needed headphones because it was too much noise. At one point there's like cooling towels and things like that. And we all just use different things from this bag. I remember there was this fidget crank toy that my friend Taryn was going to town with. And I was just really excited that there were resources out there for people whose brains don't work typically like other people's do. And when we celebrate it, it makes it just enjoyable for everybody. So that is the next tool in our sensory toolkit, our self-care menu, anything sensory related. Find what works for you. Go ahead and grab that. I remember I was going to a zoo for my work. My work had like a free zoo day or whatever. And I was talking with my friend Taryn about how much I loved fidgets and how much I just like recently discovered this love of like a little fidget toy. And as I'm talking about it, we walk in and they're like, would you guys like some fidgets? I was like, no way. I was just talking about how much I love them. And I still have this fidget toy in my bag. It was like this, it just is so nice for your brain. I just really have been enjoying those. Next thing we're going to add to our self-care menu or our sensory toolkit is visual planning. This is really helpful, especially for people with ADHD who like to forget things, is having your reminders and visual cues to help you. So this can be whiteboards, this can be calendars, color coding things, sticky notes, whatever you need to do to remember things, use that to your advantage. The next tip I have is to manipulate your environment. So this could be dimming the lights or turning them off. This could be changing the clothes you're wearing to something soft and comfortable. The older I get, the more I straight up only wear soft clothes. I cannot stand to be uncomfortable and in tight clothes or, itchy or anything like that. Like, God help me. I cannot do it. So you can control your environment in these little ways to help decrease these feelings of overwhelm or dysregulation. This could be like having your favorite scent nearby. And that can be something that's really grounding for you if you start to get a little anxious or overwhelmed. Just pulling out like a perfume sampler or an essential oil and just smelling that and really grounding and having that sense of regulation in your environment. Another thing that can be helpful is any type of communication device. So in the hospital, we have a separate unit called our neuropsychiatric specialty care unit, and that is basically for folks who have autism or intellectual disabilities. And so a lot of those kids cannot verbally communicate. And so there's different modalities of how to communicate. A lot of it is sign language, but there's different things. There's communication cards. It's like, I feel, and it's like you point to the thing that says hungry, or you can say yes or no, tell me yes or no. And so it's just really having adaptive communication when you are dysregulated, or for folks that might not be able to communicate in the typical way that neurotypical people do. And so that can look like different bracelets, maybe cue cards. This can look like some sign language. Just any type of adaptive communication can really be helpful when we're talking about neurodivergence. Another thing that can be helpful is creating some type of safe space. So some environment that is typically not stimulating, whether that's at home or at work, a place where you can go to just relax and decompress. And so I'm like, through talking about these things in this episode, I'm like, damn, my ADHD really does affect my life. Just talking about it through this lens, I'm like, wow, okay. So at work, I get a 30-minute break and then 3 10-minute breaks. And I'm not kidding you. Every break I have, I lay in a dark room. I just need the hard reset. I just need a break from all of the sensory input, from the emotional dysregulation of the kids I'm working with, from the bright lights, from the family meetings, from all of this stuff. I just need a break. And so I've created a safe space for myself at work by going to this dark back break room. I put a sign up so no one bothers me. And having that safe space is really, really nice to regulate myself. Because I'm an adult, I have a job. Like, I can't just have a full blown meltdown in the middle of my day. I mean, I could. Just having the safe space so that way I'm regulating throughout the day and I'm not waiting until I'm getting so overwhelmed and then needing that break. It's constantly taking breaks throughout the day to honor my body and to honor my needs and to really just have that nice reset. And so another tool in your toolkit can also be stimming. So stimming is really helpful for people if you're someone who stims. Rocking, humming, tapping, whatever it is, feeling like you're in a safe environment where you can do that without facing that like social ostracizing or feeling judged or bullied or whatever it is. So for my neurotypical people that are listening, a way that you can really be supportive of people is to be supportive and encouraging when people are stimming, to not stare, to not ask, to not make judgments or belittle people because of their tics and the things that make them a little bit different. If you're someone that has a hard time initiating tasks, kind of like what I've talked about, things I found that are really helpful is body doubling. So that's basically like you're doing a task with somebody else who's also doing that task, and you don't even have to be talking to each other. So it's like, oh, I need to do some homework. You're just sitting next to another person who's also doing their homework, right? And doing that body doubling can help you stay on task, and it can help you kind of initiate that task without feeling so difficult, because usually if you're doing it with a friend, you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm just hanging out with my friend, right? Co-working spaces can be really helpful. Maybe finding whatever's helpful for you to initiate a task. So maybe starting with some music, or maybe a timer, or some type of reward, or maybe even like an accountability buddy. Like, hey, I'm having a really hard time doing this. Like, I'm going to tell you when I do it, so that way you can tell me good job once I've already done it. With things like emotional dysregulation, grounding practices, that could be taking a cold shower, drinking a cold glass of water, doing breath work, tapping, journaling. I mean, there's so many different ways to regulate when you're feeling dysregulated. There's also things like weighted blankets, dimming the lights, taking noise breaks, kind of like what I do at work when I just go to a dark room and have no input. This could also be movement, so shaking your body out when you're feeling really overwhelmed and tense. So I'm going to wrap this episode up with some neurodivergent affirmations so we can celebrate our differences and the beauty of what makes us different, unique, spicy, and flavorful. Okay, so repeat after me. My brain is not broken. It's beautiful. My brain is not broken. It's beautiful. I honor my pace, my needs, and my patterns. I honor my pace, my needs, and my patterns. I do not need to apologize for who I am. I do not need to apologize for who I am. I'm allowed to rest, stim, say no, and take up space. I'm allowed to rest, stim, say no, and take up space. There is nothing wrong with me. There is nothing wrong with me. I am the spice, bold, tender, and worthy. I am the spice, bold, tender, and worthy. And I just want to send you guys off with this message. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to just be a salt and pepper, bland, boring person, okay? You are not just here to fit in. You are here to be the flavor of the world with your depth, with your brilliance, with the unique fire of your brain, okay? You are the spice. You bring so much flavor and deliciousness to this world. There is nothing wrong with you. You are built exactly as you were meant to, baby, okay? You are the healer. I had to end on the corny note. Okay, thank you guys so much for listening. You can support me in all of the links below. I'd really appreciate a follow on Instagram, and you can support my content there as well as TikTok. It's just at the letter U, the letter R, the healer. And until next time, may you be well. If you've made it this far in the episode, I have a treat for you. I am launching my one-on-one coaching program, and I now have a limited number of spots available for clients. So if you are struggling with taking care of yourself, if you have a hard time regulating your emotions, you just feel stuck, let me help you transform your life. I'm looking for people who are willing to do the deep inner work to create change in their lives. If this sounds like a hell yes, fill out the interest form in the description of the episode. And for everybody that fills out the form, I will email you a fun surprise as a thank you. So again, thank you so much for supporting You Are the Healer, and I look forward to working with some of you as your new coach.